Hello and good evening. Welcome to our panel discussion on how to avoid common pitfalls in lean implementation, or where is your lean gold? I'm Dave Ewers, the Director of Content Development for Trillion U-SME. I manage the Lean Certification Program. This webinar is being hosted by the Lean Certification Oversite and Audit Committee. And the committee includes members from AME, Shingo, SME, along with representatives from Catalysis and GBMP. We'll be discussing how many organizations have difficulties implementing a successful and sustainable lean program and what you could do to ensure success. Our panel of experts will share stories about their lean transformations, the good and the bad of it, and how to avoid some common pitfalls. Before we get started, I have a couple of housekeeping notes. We're scheduled for 45 minutes of discussion, followed by a Q&A session at the end. So if you have a question, please enter it in the Q&A tab, and we'll be monitoring that, so we'll address them after the presentation. If we don't have a chance to get to all of the questions, we'll make sure that we will respond to everybody individually. We'll be able to get a copy of these questions, so we will follow up afterwards if we can't get to your question directly. We also have a survey posted that you should see on your screen. If you could take a minute to provide your response to that question. It'll give us an idea of sort of the background of the people involved in our webinar today. So as we get started, I'd like to introduce our panel of experts. First, we have Matt Hilgendorf, who is a director with Adcore Business Systems. He joined Adcore in 2017, and he's responsible for all business improvement activities, including lean manufacturing and operational excellence. Prior to this role, he led manufacturing operations at Adcore's Allied Tube and Conduit facility in the Chicago area. He's previously held positions with Black Horse, which is a Caterpillar and Ariel Corporation joint venture, leading quality, sourcing, and operational excellence efforts. He's an SME endowment member, an active SME Education Foundation donor, and scholarship committee member. He's also spent 3 terms on the SME Board of Directors in 2012, 15, and 17. And he's named the SME Marcus B. Crofts Outstanding Young Manufacturing Engineer. We also have Bruce Patch, who is a Silver Certified member of our committee. He is the Continuous Improvement Coach for Pinnacle Assurance. He was first exposed to lean while in the Air Force as the Quality Assurance Officer at the Arizona Air National Guard, where he was asked to improve the lead time to inspect and rebuild unit aircraft. After retiring from the Air Force, Bruce joined the VA as a management analyst, helped find efficiencies in claims processing and disability ratings. During his time with the VA, he earned his bronze certification. He then went on to join the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, where he earned a silver certification and helped them to support research through more efficient and effective processes. Today, he's the continuous improvement coach for Pinnacle Assurance. His work includes training and coaching at all levels of the company. He's also involved in helping to take Pinnacle to the next level as part of their lean transformation. Audie Penn, Principal Consultant and Operations Executive for Farrell Partners. He has over 30 years of experience in manufacturing industries, including heavy equipment, food, and building materials. Serving as the Principal Consultant for the past 8 years, his expertise is evidenced by new product development in 4 multi-billion-dollar global divisions with Fortune 100 companies, and significant financial growth in 2 Fortune 100 companies and 5 divisional platform turnarounds. He is currently a Lean Gold certified committee member. Our guest panelist today is Mark Campbell, Vice President of Global Operations for IMMI. He's been with IMMI, an industry leader in the innovation, design, testing, and manufacturing of advanced safety systems since 1988. During his career, he has held various positions, including manufacturing engineering manager, operations manager for their Center for Advanced Product Evaluation. He began his lean certification journey in 2012, working for his bronze, silver, and finally gold certification in 2019. And Mark is also a member of SME and AME. So welcome to my panelists. Welcome to everybody who's joined our webinar. And I'm going to hand this over to Audie Penn. We'll start our conversation today.
Very good. Thank you, Dave. I really want to start with this quote from Taiichi Ohno, father of it all, if you will. And I think it's a great doorway into the ideas that we want you to consider in our webinar this evening. But I really appreciate the way that he states what makes it work. The key to the Toyota way and what makes Toyota stand out is not any of the individual elements, but having all the elements together as a system. And we hear that all the time, but maybe we misunderstand what he means. But it also must be practiced every day in a very consistent manner, not in spurts. And so we're going to look at this idea through many different lenses, through many different angles as we work through this webinar. But I want you to keep this quote in mind and see how it shows up through the different screens, slides that you see, and the ideas that we present. So we'll take a step forward.
So hi, everybody. Most of you have heard rumors about the number of lean implementations that have failed, and the estimate currently is that somewhere between 75 and 90% of those don't succeed when they start their implementation. And I personally have been through several of those, so I know exactly what it's like. And we talk about sometimes that it's because we don't have leadership buy-in, and other times it's because middle management isn't engaged and willing to really play. Or we say that the project team itself doesn't really have what they need and the support and the experience to be able to get things really through the goalpost. So I think there's a variety of reasons, and it's not that that 75 to 90% failure rate isn't correct. It's kind of an incomplete picture of really what's going on. And so what's missing is really this idea of lean being a set of tools, which it isn't. It partly is, but it isn't. And it's not a series of value streams that are connected or not connected. It's not that either in total. And it's not that you don't have a champion of the C-suite. It's really that, like the last slide showed, it's a complete system. And you have to have all three of those pieces in place to really make sure that this is going to be a functioning process and a philosophy throughout your organization. So what we hope to present to you here is a little roadmap of what this group and others have talked about as being kind of a time-tested path for making a big transformation. And it doesn't really matter what industry you're in, what function you're in, you can do it all. I've never been in manufacturing. I've always been more administrative processes, and it works there. But there's obviously all kinds of transformation that happen. And when you do follow this whole system and you have all these three pieces in place, what you'll find is that the deployment, when it's complete, is absolutely incredible, some of the changes that you can see.
Hi guys, so going it alone, right? So everybody, I'll say, has probably experienced this in their career at one point or another, right? And so the realization that no job can be done alone, and here we've referenced obviously the different levels of the certification. Some of you guys familiar, maybe some of you not, but at the bronze practitioner level, right? Call it tactical. That's typically where most of us have cut our teeth and learned when we go from a individual contributor, right, to leading, and in often cases in this space, leading indirectly, right, without direct control of those on a project team or other experiences. The silver practitioner, right, again, right, now integrative, right, as it says here on the slide, but this is where now leading through others even further, right? Again, the theme is the same. You can't grow that level of success just based on the number of projects one individual can run at a tactical level. And then the gold practitioner, right? Very, very strategic. The theme is the same here. I'm not going to read the slide to you, right? But this is I'll call it, obviously, the heart of what we're going to talk about here tonight is realizing at that point, almost getting more hands off, right? Unfortunately or fortunately, depending how you look at it, and leading through leaders of others, of course. So project level, right? A lot of this conversation tonight will be, project improvements, consolidations, growth opportunities, et cetera. So the level of accountability and the understanding of the level of accountability, call it erosion here, as it says in the slide, right? I think there's probably some specific examples, and I'll be looking, maybe for some insight on this tonight, right? That without that relationship to accountability, you lose that transformation, of course. And I think some of us, and I can speak to that very personally, obviously, and even in the conversations I've had today, ironically. And then that relationship to strategic imperatives, and in many cases, those of you who are familiar, say, with like Hosh and Connery, the understanding of, I'll call it the top X matrix, as many of us would refer to it in a little bit of slang term, and how that relates all the way down to the lowest operational levels. And I don't mean lowest in a derogatory sense, but down to the very, very shop floor level. You miss a target for, in this case, right, customer or business if that's misunderstood. So again, the high level topic of going it alone.
So when we look at the three levels and we think about what Matt just shared with us, a lot of times I hear people talking about lean, and what they mean is the process improvement part. And as we can see here, that's really only about 20 to 25% of the total deployment process. So again, if we look back at the three practitioners, the gold level with strategy and culture, the silver level, integrating systems and the execution of our processes, and the bronze level where processes are improved because they're off target, we start to see what the other 75% is bringing to the table. And again, going it alone in any one of these is diluting the outcome. So without the three elements working together, we can only scratch the surface of what's possible. That's contributing to that failure rate that Bruce was mentioning and we saw evidence of earlier. What they don't know, and what they don't know is one of the most difficult conversations that we can have. And as a practitioner that goes in and works with all three levels, I'm always trying to find out what's missing in their view of what a complete deployment looks like. Because there's a significant difference between a 25% deployment where we're constantly improving processes, and maybe we see a 10 to 20% improvement, which I would say is typical where lean is being applied in its incomplete form. But when you get that complete deployment, I've seen and experienced these 90% and greater transformations that, quite frankly, most executive leaders have never experienced, and they're completely surprised by it, often caught off guard by that type of transformation. I'd like to invite Mark into this conversation at this point with a question. How do you go about learning new ideas and applying these lean ideas in the operations that you've been responsible
for? Sure. When I first got into the lean journey and started on my bronze, I really didn't have much of a lean background. I mean, I understood some of the key principles, but in terms of true lean, I didn't have that, and we didn't have it in our company as far as a structured lean organization. So what was very helpful to me was simply the lean curriculum that came along with the bronze, silver, and gold. That was really a starting point for me that was very, very beneficial. I found it logical. I found it step by step, and it was something that I was able to take and really implement. In addition to that, and at the same time, I was fortunate to be able to get involved in some groups, some local AME groups. We had an Indiana consortium, and through that, I was able to connect with a lot of other folks that were on their lean journey. And really what made it real for me in terms of the lean ideas and being able to have those discussions, learn and have the back and forth was through those types of groups, being able to go and benchmark plants. Did a lot of trading plant tours. So, hey, I'd love to invite you into our plant, let you look at what we're doing, and can I bring 2 or 3 people, and can we visit your plant? So that was really where it started for me, and I still to this day love going on plant tours. I was just on one earlier this week where it was a benchmarking tour. And so for me, that is really where I love to get a lot of ideas, to see them in place on a plant floor, be able to talk to those people that are doing the things on the plant floor, understand what their struggles have been, and just have that dialogue. It's really irreplaceable.
Yeah, I like that idea, and I've experienced some similar experiences where the language that I like to use about that is I can see the common elements of a lean deployment, and I can also see the differences in interpretation as we go from industry to industry or even culture to culture. And I think that really strengthens the way that we can begin to recognize lean when often we think it's not present, but then we see how others have interpreted it, and it actually starts to surface, and we realize, oh, they're already using some of this thinking. Let's continue to build on what we recognize. Now, do you recognize that when you're out, and how do you use that when you come back into your own facilities?
Absolutely. I've not been on a plant tour yet. In all the plant tours I've been on, that I didn't learn something. Sometimes you walk away learning that you're doing some things really good. Sometimes you walk away being able to take some little nugget that you've seen that just clicks for you, that you saw. It's like you said, it's something totally outside of really how the issue you're struggling with, or that you need to apply it in, but you see the concept in place and being used, and you're able to take that and transfer it and come back and apply it to your own process or your own world. And obviously being in a manufacturing world, there's a lot of this is truly on the plant floor, but obviously there's a lot of other support processes that are office front end facing that as well, have a lot of application to lean.
And I'm glad that you mentioned the support processes. I'm interested in perhaps a story from your own experiences that came out of the support or the administrative area where you were surprised that lean was able to provide some value. Do you have a story that you could share with us out of the administrative side of things?
Yeah, probably the one that is comes to my mind as the one that's had the biggest impact on our business, I would say, is the process of going through and setting up new part numbers. The nature of our business, we have a lot of engineering changes that come through. A lot of times they're customer requested. A lot of times they're our own improvements that we're making. In that we supply a safety product, there is a lot of regulation around it, and we have to make sure that what we're producing and shipping is going to save a life when it needs to. So we have to be rigorous in our changes, and our change process had really stretched out to where even the simplest of changes was pushing 14 weeks, which was just, it's not, we couldn't sustain that in the business. We needed the changes to be able to go through a lot faster. So as we really dug into that, you can go through and you apply the lean principles of flow, one piece flow. Everybody has a queue and all these little steps that you go through. But how do you really break that down? How do you get teams organized around being able to focus on the right things at the right time, passing only the information they need, but all the information that they need at the same time? And we've been able to really collapse that time down. There's enough volume of going through there. I would say that today, if we don't touch anything, it probably is still a 6 to 8 week time, but we have a mechanism within there that the changes that we need to get through, we can get through in less than 2 weeks. And that includes all of the regulatory testing that would need to go along with that. So that's probably been the biggest support process type improvement that we've made, because the alternative to that is we were trying to run the plant with all these deviations in place. And that really, as many of you know, it just wreaks havoc on a plant floor when you're trying to always work around the system instead of allow the system to help you.
Absolutely. Understand. And thank you for the story. I appreciate it.
I saw a lot of virtual head shaking as soon as Mark said engineering change, and it was, oh yeah, so I raised your hand if you've done it before, and then right, and everybody's saying, wow, yeah, it's amazing how that's common in a lot of our businesses. All right, so the three practitioners, right? So every transformation requires full participation, right? So those of you guys who are in, I'll say, mature transformations, mature businesses, mature journeys, sometimes the most challenging part is actually good sponsorship. Oftentimes at a gold level, right? These are some of our folks in our organizations that have some of the most challenging schedules. Staying close to projects, staying in keeping good understanding, monitoring progress. So good sponsorship is a key, and often can be a lot more challenging than we would expect. Some of the most pivotal transformations I've been part of are due to great sponsorship, as we all know, right? Executive belief and executive following of the projects, I guess I should say, is often critical. The process ownership at the silver level, right? Making sure that the measurement strategy and capturing of the right measurements, and then truly like a follow-up method, like a 30, 60, 90, things of that nature in terms of ownership. And then the project lead and project team at the bronze level, right? So talk about accountability, execution, right, at the project level, and then the performance, I'll call it performance management even. So there are three distinct, I'll call it layers here, three distinct requirements for success. None of them, right, I can't say, let me say it differently. You can't take any one of those out and expect a successful transformation. They're all equally as critical, even though they're very, very different in the respect of accountability, execution, and process performance. The word diluted is probably a very good word to use here. You're very quickly going to see watered down results. And then, of course, we all know what happens once we start seeing that watering down or that dilution. The belief or the energy in the transformation starts to fade very, very quickly.
Yeah, so I'd like to ask Mark another question here. Given what we're focusing here, can you give us some examples of where either the presence of all three levels helped out or a missing element actually created a poor outcome?
So what I thought I might do here, Audie, is we've certainly had a broad range of how we've tried to approach that here in our business, and we've had plenty of times where it hasn't worked so well. As you note, the outcome being diluted, certainly have experienced that. I guess I'd like to start by maybe describing what I believe we've found to be the sweet spot, or how this really seems to work well for us. So in our world, the sponsor part, we have that as our operational leadership. So it's really the plant managers, myself, my lead, who is the COO, and then we also bring up into that sponsor responsibility as the continuous improvement manager at the plants. So that's kind of the team members that have this, I'll say, the accountability section of it. And then the process owners are generally that mid-level management. And then the project team, obviously, are those working on the project. But what we have found to be critical for success in that is if we end up having too many people that I'll say are technical in that process team, and not enough people that are really those team members on the plant floor doing the work, we end up with something that is tough to sustain. So what we found is in that project team, we need to have at least 50% of our team members are those that are actually doing the work in the area that we're trying to improve. Because it just, again, not to offend, and I've got an engineering background, so I guess I can say this, but engineers can tend to complicate things, and certainly keeping it simple is of great value when it comes to lean and comes to making it actually usable and sustainable on the plant floor. So that's kind of the composition of those teams. Really on the sponsor side, I think the number one thing is just to encourage and foster the environment where the team members can bring their ideas forward and work them out into a final solution. That is the number one thing that I found that is needed at the sponsor level. That, and in our business, at least, the other part is what I call air traffic controlling. Just making sure that the other projects and initiatives going on in the business are not going to have a conflict at that time with this project that we're trying to do. I've been bit by that before, where the team did really good work and then just a totally different initiative in the business came along and basically wiped out the advantage that was developed as part of the solution. So those are really the things at a sponsor level that I really try to look at. And then I found as long as I get the right composition on the team and really have a strong representation of those people that are going to do the work when the project's over, much, much greater chance of success.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Hey, Audie, can I ask you a question?
Absolutely, please.
So this actually may be directed more towards you. I've noticed in the different organizations that I've been in that most companies or organizations have different ways of actually implementing the lean program. So I've seen some where consultants come in and they sell the tactical portion of it, where you're going to do stand-ups, you're going to do visual management, you're going to do A3s. And then I've seen other organizations where you've got this top-down direction of you guys are going to have a lean program, but they don't really foster, encourage, support having project leaders. So in your experience as a consultant coming into a company, I'm sure you've seen the same types of things. What's a good roadmap for how somebody can actually start a good systematic lean implementation?
I think understanding the scope of what an organization is capable of addressing is an important element. But we try to make sure that all four elements that we use, four elements that we talk about, are present. And three of them are here on the screen, the gold level, the sponsor, the strategic level, and cultural level. The silver level, integrative and execution. The bronze level, we call it the tactical level, where changes are made. But the fourth element that we talk about is the leadership element. And leadership is always present. The question is, how effective is it? And if it's a purely directive leadership culture, even what Mark was sharing with us would fail because you're not inspiring people to participate. And when I listen to Mark tell his stories and learn more about his experiences, I feel confident that Mark understands what that inspirational and influential leadership culture looks like, because he wouldn't have had the successes that he's had over his career, and he wouldn't be here talking with us if he didn't have that. And so I'm confident that he sees all four of those pieces. To answer your question, though, what we try to do is make sure no matter what level in the organization we're dealing with, every role understands that all of these pieces are present, whether you're at the executive level, and I'm going to translate the strategy term into what's important. We can answer that question no matter where we are in the organization. We can execute processes to create that as long as it's clear. And we can invite people into creating better processes when we recognize they're not creating what we expect them to at the tactical level. But we can do that at any level in the organization. And sometimes that makes it seem a little complicated, but the simplicity of what we do is simply lost in the complexity of the org structure. And we have to help those who we're trying to guide get back to the simple view of what it is we're up to. And I would invite you, Mark, to come in and comment on that if I missed anything or overstated something.
No, I think you described that very well. It's, if my experience is that at the end of the day, if you don't get to the plant floor level, it's incredibly difficult to sustain any change that you put in. You can get any change through in a short blitz type project, but come back in 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, in a lot of cases it won't be there. So the way we've really tried to look at it over the years in learning as we've gone along and had projects that have not been successful is, we have hundreds of team members that are out there in the plant floor building the product every day. those are the ones that we have to, all the effort to me is to go into those individuals to equip them and get their ideas and then have them bring forward what it is that they think we need to do. And a lot of times we might even go down a path that, from my experience level, I have a pretty good feeling that what they're proposing as the next step is not really maybe what's needed or where we will end up, but it's the value of allowing them to take that step by step. Okay, let's make that change. How did it work? Well, this part worked really well, but this part didn't. And it's that iterative process. That's what you can't speed that up, in my opinion. The better you can do engaging them, letting them learn, try things out, even if you're not fully confident it's going to work. At the end of the day, I believe you get to the answer that is sustainable faster if you let the teams really have the autonomy to try their ideas and learn from them.
Yeah, that was going to be one of the follow-up questions I had for you, Mark, was, so many companies are afraid of failing, or it's not allowed to fail. And this iterative process you're talking about, it really relies on that. It really somebody has to go out and try to experiment and check and see if it works. And sometimes it doesn't. And so and I'll ask this of both Audie and Mark, but how do you get an organization to realize that it's okay not to make progress and to fall back sometimes and move forward as opposed to reverting back the old way?
So I guess I'll go first, Audie. That was a learning process in our organization. It was not natural, was not something that was in place when I really first started on the lean journey and we were trying to do this. It was it felt fairly judgmental, right? You would make a change and then it was, it just had this feeling of almost hands on your hips. Okay, how's that working? It's been 1 week. Okay, it's been 2 weeks. And really, I've had several leads over the years, several bosses, and the last 2 that I've had have just been really, really influential in the organization to be able to say, look, we make a safety product. That's the part we can't mess up. So there is no, you can't have the latitude to make a mistake there. But other than that, you've got the opportunity to try something and then back up from it, and to try something and fail, or to try something 2 or 3 times, and maybe in the process we spend an extra $10,000, to get there. But the learning that goes on with the team members is what's invaluable. And so really for me, I lived through the time when there really wasn't that autonomy to be able to make the mistakes, and then being able to get some leadership in here that understood that and created the space that it was okay to do this. That just made all the difference in the world.
Yeah, Bruce, I get myself in trouble with this one with a lot of my clients because this is a cultural issue to me. And when failure is addressed in a punitive manner, it just shuts everyone down. And so creating a culture that allows mistakes, we don't want to make mistakes that destroy an organization. That's not what I'm talking about. And I don't think Mark is either. But if we respond in a punitive manner to failures, we turn off the learning activity because nobody wants to take that risk anymore. And so I get myself in trouble because I will always hold the mirror up to leadership in an organization. And I've said and kind of got some raised eyebrows a few times, if there's something about your culture that you don't like, take a look in the mirror and tell me what we need to change, because that's where it's coming from. And I think that's the connection to the next slide we have here, because truly understanding what that level, that sponsorship or strategic level brings to the organization is a big part of them showing up. And an answer to the question, and I'm looking at it up in the corner, where is your lean gold? Well, there's a value to that gold, and sometimes we don't know what it is.
Yeah, so thanks for that for both of you. I think that's really important. There's such a cultural aspect to it. And so that really does bring us to this idea of the value of a gold practitioner. And really the whole reason for this webinar today is to talk about what value a gold practitioner brings, and why you should invest in people to be able to do this and allow that to move forward. And I really, from my perspective, I'm not gold certified. I would love to be at some point. But just from the perspective of a bronze and a silver practitioner, looking at that gold, I think that we do oftentimes think that the project team themselves is a constraint. To Mark's point earlier, the folks on the floor are the folks that actually make that difference and drive that value. And so we often think that if we don't get that value, it's the fault of the project team. And I don't think that's necessarily true, because what we really need to see is understanding and having the support of that sponsor at the gold level, somebody who can champion those projects and really drive those projects home. And so they really become that fuel and that energy for a lean implementation program that really makes a big difference. And we always talk about that. Experience has shown us that when a lean program fails, oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes, it's because leadership hasn't been there. And I don't think that's necessarily true. I think they do provide that energy, that fuel when they're there. And there's certainly a necessary part. I think the big secret here is really about the gold practitioner's ability to have a voice in the company. And oftentimes they need a big voice in the company, because they need to be able to stand up and say, it's okay for us to not make as much progress as we wanted to. It's okay for us to spend some time, take a little bit of time out of our daily lives to do some process improvement or to do some reflecting on what didn't work. And they need that support to be able to encourage the project teams to be able to do that and to have that air traffic control that Mark was talking about. So I really do think that's a huge part of it. And so understanding, having somebody that understands how these three levels all mesh together and how they work together and how they create a synergistic effect, I think is really the true measure of capacity of a lean organization and the value that a gold team can bring.
Absolutely. And it brings to mind, Bruce, a story for me, and I'm thinking about Mark right now, because I was working on a project with an organization and encouraged the vice president of operations to actually sit in the meeting. And he said, well, I'm afraid I will influence the meeting in a bad way. And I said, well, I need you to observe and I need you to provide input when the team perhaps goes in the wrong direction. And he reluctantly agreed. And as he sat in the corner and listened to the conversation, I saw him begin to kind of squirm at the conversation. And I called a timeout and I invited him to share with us what was causing his discomfort. And he says, well, I can't tell you everything, but I'll tell you this. If you go in the direction that you're discussing right now, next week you're going to learn something that sends you in a completely different direction. And what he was trying to say is, we're getting ready to announce something. I can't tell you what it is, but I don't want you to commit to what you're discussing right now, because next week I'm going to change direction on you. And the team actually appreciated the input. And so this is a very tactical look at the impact that a sponsor can have on a conversation. But I think it's very reflective of what Bruce was just describing. They have to be connected enough to understand, is the organization moving in the direction that I have committed to at my level? And am I actually communicating clearly into the organization the direction that I'm hoping that they will take? And Mark, again, I invite you into to challenging that or contributing to that from some of your own experience.
No, I think you're spot on. I do have the luxury, I'll say, of, with my position as a VP, I do have that. It's very easy for me to be able to look across the different initiatives and be able to keep things lined up, or at least understand where we're going at different directions in the business at different times, and to be able to keep that aligned so that we don't have mismatches. It would certainly be more challenging, if I wasn't able to do that. However, I do think, it's, to me, you mentioned, leadership in the meetings, and I find I don't necessarily go to a lot of the meetings, but I'll be there at maybe the start of the meeting to encourage them, or I come in at the end. Um, I do feel like at times if I'm there, maybe there's an influence that I don't want to be bringing to the meeting, but I want to make sure they understand that it's important. So whether it's just, I'm walking through the plant, and it took a while. I mean, it really took a while for people to get comfortable stopping me and sharing an idea that they have, or just openly being able to make a suggestion. We had to really work at that and get it to where there wasn't a fear. And we worked really, really hard to make sure that we have this very open atmosphere that really allows them to come forward with their ideas, or if something's not right or something's not working, they have that freedom to say it without fear that they're getting somebody in trouble.
Absolutely.
But I think that's really important. Sorry, Audie, I didn't mean to step on you there, but I know as a practitioner, one of the keys to my success has been that I kind of keep the sponsor informed as we go along, so that he or she is not surprised by the actions of a team. And I always invite them in for kind of if I'm doing a Kaizen week or a rapid improvement week, I usually invite them in about halfway through and let them kind of see and observe what's going on, kind of get a direction or a vector check, and see if we're going in the right direction, or if we need to make some variations before we proceed on. And so I think having that balance between sponsor being in the event and sponsor being completely disconnected from the event until the results, that's a way that I've been able to succeed at doing that.
Matt, we're back to you.
Great. So I'm going to draw on a couple of examples or a couple of topics that were brought up earlier, right? So the pace, right? So earlier we were talking about, leadership and fear in some cases, right? So the fail and fail fast concept is one that, I utilize often, but the pace is one that I feel has also got a connection to fear in some cases. So the lasting change has a pace, as it says here. If there's a fear of running a project too slowly, or there's an expectation of how fast a transformation needs to happen, it often obviously leads a team down the wrong path, and or can lead down the wrong path. My point here would be simply, right, there's got to be enough understanding. The participation is key, ownership to sustain these changes long term. And oftentimes there's some phrases I've used with transformations that I have in my organization right now. In some cases, it's we use a 30, 60, 90-day structure for follow-up, right? Maintaining the glide path or improvements through 30, 60, 90-day targets. And if you miss one of those targets, okay, great, we go to 120 days just to maintain that sustainability. At 120 days, you'd say, hey, I'm still not achieving that sustainability. Great, we need to go back to square one and understand where we didn't successfully transition this to lean daily management. So I use that as an example of pace, right? I'll call it the gold level, at a sponsor level. It's not dictating the pace. It's making sure the team understands their pace needs to be that calculation, as it looks like here, right? Hey, there's a solution, and then there's an acceptance. Hey, how fast can you make believers out of this team? How fast can you make believers out of these people doing this job? That's a phrase I use, make believers, because I've seen it time and time again. There's that initial change management challenge, and then you'll see people start coming around. And that calculation here that's key to that result. That makes sense to you guys.
Absolutely. So, Bruce, I want to go back to your question, because I think on this slide we kind of answer it. And the question I'm referring to is, what is the approach that we take as consultants coming in? And this really is a framework that is a reflection of that. And it always starts with what's important. And strategy can be seen at every level of the organization. And maybe I should change that statement to strategy must be seen at every level of the organization. And how we translate and interpret what's important at the executive level down to the customer-facing processes is a big part of what strategy deployment is about. So what's important? How do we measure it? Who has to know this? And once we get clarity at those process levels, now we have a much better chance of actually changing what needs to change. In the management space, we use this approach called model process, model role, where we methodically approach the processes within the responsibility of any role in the organization to define what's important, to create those accountability cycles, and then to standardize or create routines that allow managers to be where they need to be when they need to be there. And of course, you see the process improvement layer where our improvements are targeted, they're aligned to the strategic imperatives, they're sustainable, and out of that sustainable improvement, we actually are able to find the new opportunities that keep us moving forward and maybe even push us beyond what the strategic imperative had asked us for. But because we've got momentum and we've got sustainability, we're actually able to move beyond what the executive office had really expected. And I've got stories about how we've really surprised some leaders by actually going beyond what they were expecting. And so this is, once again, just another view of what that complete deployment looks like. What you don't see on this page is the leadership. And for me, I want to say I take it for granted, but I don't, because we're always working with leaders to check their presence and to improve their presence, to inspire people to want to be part of what's going on in the organization. So, Bruce, I'll throw it right back to you.
Well, I know we're getting kind of short on time, and this won't take very long for me, but there are two kind of major mistakes that are always made when you're trying to master lean, and that's one is not getting started, and two is not finishing. I'm going to modify it just a little bit because I don't know that you're ever really truly finished. So I'd maybe modify that second statement to say not continuing. And so, pushing through. And this really, again, applies to all three levels. Having somebody that is at each of those three, gold, silver, and bronze level, or, strategic and sponsor management and process team, they all need to get started. And they all need to know how they interact with each other, and they all need to continue on. And that's really where the sustainability comes. If you got a project team that does something, to Mark's point earlier, you've made an improvement and it looks great, but 30 days later you come back, it's probably because you didn't have the other two levels engaged and continuing to ask questions about how that process is going and whether it's actually truly providing the value and the output that you wanted to get from that original investment in your time and energy to be able to make that improvement in the first place. So get started. That's the biggest thing, and then keep it going.
Excellent. Thank you. Dave?
Boy, thank you guys, and thank the panelists. This is a great conversation, a lot of great topics. I've got one question that came up, and one is, and the question is related to sort of the pace and the drive for a sustainable kind of lean environment. And this question is probably to everybody on the panel is, is there a reasonable time frame that an organization can look at when they start this lean journey to say, we start it now. At this point, we should be at that point where we can say we have a sustainable lean culture. So, is there some kind of time frame that you've seen in your experiences that it takes an organization so long to get to a point where they can claim that, hey, we've got this process down and we are sustainable?
Mark, let's put you in the hot seat.
So from my experience, I guess I would answer that question is, I think it does depend on the organization. I don't think there is an exact formula. However, I would say, there's two ways we've approached it at different plants, different times in the business. You get the huge, the huge push. It's something major. We've got to get it done on a timeline. It's mission critical. Those kind of things you push them through, and if you do it right, you can make a lot of progress in one big project. However, I would say I really have trouble sustaining those over time in terms of if you're talking about true cultural change. Maybe that project sustains, but have we really gotten to the point that all the team members in that organization are really able to take those same concepts and apply it forward? So I have found much greater success starting small, starting in certain pockets, sticking with it long enough that you really have people that are taking it themselves and running with it. And in that case, I mean, I would say the slower approach, it's the better part of 18 months before, I really feel like there's a foundation there that the team is ready to completely run with it themselves on new things that come up where they need to tackle ongoing improvements.
Thank you.
Well, Dave, Mark, don't you think that after that, though, that's just like a segment of the organization? Then that has to catch fire with another group and another group. I've seen, for me, it seems like it typically is somewhere between 6 and 8 years. I think there's a lot of tendency to grow for those first 2 years or 3 years, and then that feels to me like that's kind of the tipping point. As you get to a 3 or 4 year point, and either the organization is committed to keep driving forward, or it kind of falls off the cliff. Would you say that's a common experience for you as well?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, it's definitely measured in years when you're talking about an entire segment of the organization. It's really hard to speed that up and really have it be real and sustainable.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And my experience, the one that comes to mind, I'm working with a client in Texas right now, and we're in year 4, and we're finally getting strategy deployment down to the term they use is L6, but it's the 6th level supervisor in this large organization. And year 1, we facilitated the conversation between the L1, the highest level in the organization, and his staff. And that was a little muddy for the first time, but good things came out of it. Year 2, it got a little better, and we started to bump into L3 and L4. The next year, we solidified that, and here we are in year 4 now, and L5 and L6 are starting to get into and involved in these conversations, and we're really seeing the momentum pick up, and the rate of change has increased over this 4-year period. And so the pace will change as the organization changes into this type of a business approach. And so that's kind of what came to my mind as we're talking about pace. There's not a single pace, and I think Mark kind of alluded to that, but what's the pace that we need right now? And how do we know that we're on a sustainable pace? I mean, there are a lot of things that we can look for, but if we're not paying attention in that way, we may become very frustrated and push things and actually be the problem to continuing toward that future of a complete deployment rather than contributing to it in a positive way.
All right, great. Thank you. We've got another question. The question is, do you see companies that are using the bronze, silver, and gold certification process as a mechanism or strategy to develop internal talent?
I can take this one, speaking personally, right? So Matt Hilgendorf here, and responsible for our lean operations, as I would call them here within our organization at Core. We are using the bronze certification, both as development and also as demonstration. So what do I mean by that? There are some individuals that are on their lean journey within our organization right now, and we're in the neighborhood of between 20 and 30 people right now at very, very different stages of their certification. Some of those individuals, it's a development opportunity. So they've been handpicked because of a high performer potentially moving to a next level. This is one way for them to gain some additional experience and insight. Or say, for instance, this is a new operations supervisor that's coming to the organization, a new manufacturing engineer, or a new lean leader. And this is part of their, I don't say requirements, because it's not a job requirement, but it's one of those things that is almost expected, and at some point probably will be expected. But hey, please show us that you're committed to demonstrating your ability to apply the knowledge of the tools that you continue to add to your toolbox, right? So there's two different reasons why we use it. I'm not saying there's not three or four, but those would be the two very distinct reasons that we're using it within our organization right now. And the silver, I'm personally on my silver journey now, and I definitely see expanded use of our silver. And probably several years down the road, unfortunately, I wish it was sooner. The use of the gold, especially at the vice president and president level, because we are, I'll call it lean culture. The lean journey is built into who we are. So, truly every leader in an organization is part of that journey. So I do see us having expanded use, but certainly actively at the lean or at the silver and the bronze right now.
Yeah, and I'll add to that, Matt, that I'm seeing a lot of organizations now that are using the certifications as a development tool. A lot of them start out with bronze to get the tactics and the tools down. But then as they engage in it more, they're finding that they're needing to look at the silver and gold certifications as they expand it within the organization so that now they can start the organizational change and that culture shift. So it's slowly picking up, and we're seeing more and more of it getting integrated into companies as a development plan, and then the end result would be the certifications.
And I'd like to add one thought to this. In the organizations that I am exposed to, those that are using it have a completely different feel to their deployment of lean because of the presence and the learning that's taking place at those other two levels.
Agreed. Well, I don't have any more questions coming in from our attendees, but I did want to make a note that we will send out the PowerPoint presentation to those that attended, as well as post the recorded webinar on the website. And you'll find that under the Truly New website, under the sort of buried in there. It's under the resources, and then it's under the watch and listen tab. You'll be able to find the recording. But give us a few days to get that posted up there. So once again, we've got a few minutes left. But I want to thank our panelists. I want to thank all of you that joined us today. I hope you enjoyed it. I thought it was a great conversation, and I think we covered a lot of ground today. But once again, thank you, everybody. And I guess we'll wrap things up there and have a good night.